if there's an end game to this, which, if I'm honest, there isn't. There's not really if I'm fully honest or I'm fully reflecting on my truth, I suppose, there's no end game. There's just expression. There's just words coming and so forth. But if there is an end game, if there were an end game, it would be about service, really. How do we serve the world? How do we serve those who suffer? How do we live the Dharma? How do we live what we've realized? How do we minimize or reduce the suffering that we inflict on ourselves and others? Primarily ourselves. You can, I think Dalai Lama said somewhere, like, you can just go ahead and be selfish and address your own pain, meditate, become mindful. That kind of selfishness is wonderful because that's how you address the pain of the world. I've seen it on occasion where people can become so disconnected from themselves that they're truly convinced they're going to help the world. They're going to help their kid or they're obsessed with that, right? Obsessed with helping this person or that person or this cause, but they're not really helping themselves and they're really suffering a lot. And that's it's an unfortunate side effect of the mind, I suppose, that we can project so much outward. I guess projection would be the word for that, but you have to start here always. I mean, you have to stay here. I talk about practice or use the term practice, whereas some other, say, like New Advaita type teachers never speak that way, right? To talk about practice or practices or meditation or inquiry, it's just feeding or fueling the seeker and, on and on. And there's some truth to that, but it's also somewhat wrong in that there's no need to deny the relative at all. And the practice really is not something technical necessarily. It can be, but that's not the heart of it. The heart of practice is really a commitment, and it's a commitment to truth. It's the same thing that got you on this path in the first place. It's the same thing that resonated when you read Eckhart Tolle or when you went to a satsang for the first time or whatever happened that showed you there's something more. That's that instinct. That is your attunement to truth. And over time or with practice or with insights, we find that commitment to truth deepens. You can use a lot of different terminology for it. You call it your commitment to the Dharma, whatever. But that's practice. That's the practice. And it takes all kinds of forms. It takes the form of one-pointed introspection, one-pointed inquiry. It takes the form of shadow work. It takes the form of prolonged meditation and retreat work. It takes the form of just living your life in a very conventional way and being completely open and showing up for whatever appears and doing your best to get through it even when you don't have all the skills and even when you do have conditioning and when you do watch yourself stumble and make mistakes and, So this practice of attunement to truth shows up in many forms. and that's beautiful, right? It's wonderful. Because as we deepen our attunement, our commitment, and our practice, even when the practice is really approached from a place of spontaneity, which will come, even then, it's helpful to always have a bit of openness to the possibility of delusion, of overlooking something, of missing something. Because the clarity, in my experience, does continue to dissolve more and more subtle fixations and obstructions and so forth. It also helps you trust the way the body moves through life and the way the appearances appear and events seem to rearrange themselves such that you can become a benevolent presence. You can serve in a way that feels really aligned at all levels. So, in my estimation, or the way I point, or the way I talk about this, awakening always has to come first. Because without that, you can really delude yourself. I've said it a bunch of times. My Zen teacher used to say it in a really cool way. I put it in my book. But ultimately, if you're really in a significant amount of delusion, unconsciousness, you can really think you're doing good in the world, and you could be doing a lot of harm. We all know examples of that, but it also happens in smaller ways too, right? So a commitment to kindness and love and honesty and trust and authenticity, all that is wonderful. But again, without awakening, it can be co-opted so easily. And so that's why I talk about what I talk about, why I put it first. I don't put it last, but I put it first. I do talk, as everyone here knows, I talk about shadow work, and I emphasize the importance of that. I emphasize the importance of emotion work and integration and all the things. But the commitment to waking up and then continuing to clarify that initial insight in direct experience is critical. And that's the practice. That's a very, very important part. It's the backbone of practice. The limbs and the tissue and the eyes and ears and nose and all that of the practice are our conventional life, shadow work, all the situations and eventualities, the challenges and joys of inhabiting a body, all of that. So there's nothing that is not practice. When I say practice, I'm always a little cautious that it doesn't land in this way, that spirituality, Zen, Advaita, whatever this is for you, is just a part of your life. It's the part of your life you use to make other parts of your life better. It may feel like that for a while, but at some point that's clearly not the case. What I'm pointing out and talking about is not part of life. It is all of life. It is all of experience and all of what is not experienced. So there is a paradox here in talking about practice, talking about commitment, in that those can be perceived as dualistic, for sure. And this is why what is required of us is deep realization. With deep realization, meaning non-dual, no self, anatta, and so forth, with that, you've solved the problem of the relative and absolute. Before that, it's confusing. It is confusing, you know. Are Tony Parsons and Jim Newman right? Nothing, there's no doer, and the doer can't do anything. The doer can't find its own salvation. It also can't end its own suffering, right? And so forth. There's nothing essentially that says there's nothing to do, and so forth. There's truth to that, but it's not the deepest truth. There's a deeper truth that finds no distinction between relative and absolute, that says, yes, that is true, and also there's practice. Yeah. There's no self. And also there's no reason to deny any conventional aspects of your life at all, including emotions, feelings, ownership, responsibility. There's no reason you don't have to deny any of that. But there's so many pitfalls here, right? Because you can fool yourself with that too, out of a fear of really going through that final barrier. And I've seen this as well. That this all just becomes about sort of living a good life, being a good human, and then kind of putting spirituality or insight on a back burner. I don't recommend that. This will take everything, and it has to. But only when it's taken everything, only when everything has been relinquished, will you really know relative and absolute, absolute and relative, same. This is the Heart Sutra. The Heart Sutra points to this so beautifully. Also, the Xin Ming, affirming faith and mind. Those are the same thing. It points very, very clearly to this. Beautiful writing. And so that's what it ultimately ends up being about, is outwardly extending your hands, helping others, being of service, simplicity, fluidity, equanimity, enjoyment, natural enjoyment of the twists and turns, ups and downs of life, challenges and so forth. And inwardly, empty of self, empty of motivation, empty of fabrication, purpose, meaning. Even that distinction is a little bit unnecessarily black and white, but it is also true. Nisargadatta said in two things he said. There's two quotes he has that I just absolutely love. Probably most people here have heard both of them, but one of them is, in my world, love is the only law. I don't ask for it, I give it. He hasn't asked for it because there's no need to receive anything, because all there is abundance. There's nothing apart. That's non-duality. Non-duality is so intimate, right? What could I possibly need? And need is just seen to be a figment of the imagination anyway, really, ultimately. There's just appearance, vivid appearance. And that will come in all kinds of forms. It will come in physical connection and tenderness, and it will come in loneliness, and it will come in movement and stillness and busyness and calmness and all kinds of forms. But his other quote is the quote that really makes the first one shine, and that is, when I look outward and see that I am everything, that is love. When I look inward and see that I am nothing, that is wisdom. Between these two, my life turns, or between these two, my life flows. And that's a really beautiful description of relative and absolute being ultimately not two things, not two phenomena, not two modes of experience,